It's sometimes an odd thing to see a uh, rather old movie at this point that's about or was intended to be about very specific issues of the time, and to have them still be relevant now. And it's depressing when those issues revolve around race, and it feels like a lot of what I just saw I could have seen in the news yesterday. This is a commissioned review. Do the Right Thing. This is sort of Spike Lee's big breakthrough movie. He'd done a couple movies before this, but this was the one that really kind of solidified him as somebody with a career on the rise, as opposed to just an interesting indie creator. And I can see why. I have not seen a particularly large amount of Spike Lee's filmography. I've seen some of it. I've seen Malcolm X. I have seen Inside Man. There's a bunch I have been meaning to see, but I haven't gotten around to. Oh, I've seen Bamboozled. Watched that one in college. I've seen kind of a mix of his stuff, and he is always a very interesting filmmaker. He is. I'm not sure I'd go so far as to say he has a distinct style, the way that, say, like Sam Raimi or even Tarantino do. He does to a certain extent, but it's just much more a defined perspective, if that makes sense. Like he will get show-offy with the camera, usually when zeroing right on a character's face, having them address the camera directly. That is definitely a thing that he does, but it feels less like a directorial signature than just something to really punctuate very specific moments. As jarring as it can be, it often feels appropriate when it comes up. Oh, I saw his Old Boy. That was the other one I saw. That one wasn't his fault. I think anybody trying to do an American remake of Old Boy was stepping into a trap. But anyways, this is a film I had not seen before, but I'd heard about. I'd heard about this for a while. Keep in mind, I started to really get into film as an art form in the mid '90s. So he got talked about in sort of the up and comers, the big new talents in the same breath as Tarantino and, don't laugh, Kevin Smith. Look, Clerks. I think it's hard to appreciate right now how big of a deal Clerks was when that movie happened. But there was this really intense fervor around these new indie directors, and I remember hearing about this movie kind of in that context. So I had never seen it before, and it is set during a heat wave, an atrociously bad heat wave in New York, in a predominantly black neighborhood, and I want to say it centers around that. I mean that very literally, kind of orbits around Sal's Pizzeria. Sal's famous pizzeria, which has been there for ages. And as we see the neighborhood and we get to know the people who live there and the people who work there and the people who just kind of exist because they've got nowhere else to be, and the people who seem to want to get out, the people who seem to want to make it a better place, the people who don't really seem to give a crap either way, the people who mean well, the people who don't, the people who don't seem to mean anything, but you trip over them all the same. It is very much an ensemble film. And just seeing and existing for nearly 2 hours in space with all of these characters in this setting, it's pretty immersive. Now, like I lived in New York for 4 years. I lived in a Puerto Rican neighborhood. And I'm not going to say that this was at all representative of my experience living in New York in the latter half of the 2000s, when this is depicting New York in the 1980s. But I recognized an energy for sure. Like you could definitely tell this was not shot on some back lot, that this was filmed in New York. There is a very distinct energy that comes from doing that this definitely has. The cast is stacked. Like, to be fair, a lot of these people would become big deals later, and they weren't really at the time. Folks like Samuel L. Jackson and John Turturro, Martin Lawrence, and some of these people in real small parts. Rosie Perez, this was her first movie. I couldn't even begin to go through the cast list. Oh, Giancarlo Esposito. Like, I'm saying I shouldn't go through the cast list, but like my brain is still latching onto people. Like, this is an astounding cast. And oddly, you've got Spike Lee himself kind of as the closest thing to a central character, playing Mookie, who is the pizza delivery boy for Sal's. And I don't think Spike is a particularly good actor. I do think he works in this part, though. For what Mookie's function is within the story and the kind of person that he is, I think that what Spike is able to bring is what this character needs. I wouldn't say it's a good performance, but I would absolutely say it's a very fitting performance. It is the appropriate performance for this character, and I think he wrote to his own strength, which is something that is not always easy to do. But I also see why he didn't keep starring in things, especially once he started to work with people like Samuel L. Jackson, who's in this, and Denzel Washington later on. So I could see why he didn't keep putting himself in his own movies very much, or at least not as the central character. But no, he works here. And it really is this wonderful mix of characters. Everyone is an individual. Nobody's a monolith, even as a lot of tension and lines get drawn along racial divides. The notion of the blacks, the Hispanics, the Italians. There's a shop owned by a Korean family, so there's tension there. And like, that's the thing. The heat wave turns up the heat, and just sort of stuff that was always already there just starts bubbling and boiling and breaking surface until it all spills over in the climax at the end. It takes a while to get there, though. It is a slow boil. It is, well, I say slow boil. I mean, I kind of knew where the movie was going, but I still, even watching it, knowing where it was going, I still find myself thinking, I feel like most audiences would just innately get a sense of, like, this is going to end badly for almost everybody, at least a little bit, just because things just are getting tenser, scene by scene, as you see, various characters, some of whom are trying to just get by, some of whom are even trying to keep the peace, and then others who are just a bad thing to have around, especially Sal's older son, played by John Turturro, who has, is very openly at times racist. Then you have Sal himself, who clearly likes this neighborhood and cares about the people here. And, a lot of these people, grew up as kids around him, and they like him and he likes them, but that tension is still there. And so when something fully snaps, the tension all hits the surface. And suddenly the histories don't matter as much as what has now been said and done and what's happened. And the anger behind a lot of what happens in the climax, it's funny. I'm kind of glad I didn't see this closer to when it came out, or when I was younger, when I was starting to take in, what I thought were the cinephile essentials back when I cared about stuff like that. I'm glad I didn't watch it back then, because I don't think I would have appreciated it as much. I think living in a time and having been made aware because of some very unfortunate and very visible realities, of the world. I think if I tried to watch this sooner, I think my privilege would have blinded me to a lot of what it's doing and how tangible and visceral it is. I think my privilege would have had me a little bit more detached from it. And watching it now, if you followed anything that's gone on in the last 5-6 years, that feels very well captured in this movie that is 35 years old. That's depressing. I think it's actually a more depressing thing to watch now than it would have been at the time. Because I think I mean, I'm projecting a little bit here, but I would think you could watch it at the time and think, boy, things are messed up. Maybe we'll get a handle on it. Whereas I come in here watching it 35 years later going, boy, things were messed up. And they didn't get better. They arguably got worse. I will definitely say that compared to, say, Mississippi Burning, which I did, I think, last month, this is lacking that. Like, you can tell that there was a black filmmaker behind this one. And you could very much tell it was white creatives behind Mississippi Burning. As well-intentioned as that movie was and as good as the performances were, this feels like it comes from a much more authentic place, a much more connected place, from someone who has a much better understanding of what it is he's putting up on screen, as opposed to strictly an academic understanding, like a reading about it and hearing about it. This feels, and not just from Spike Lee, also from the performances, this feels far more informed by people's life experiences rather than just stuff they have heard or read about, which felt like the case for a lot of Mississippi Burning. So definitely, I mean, I can't help but compare it to that, and I would rate this above that every single day of the week, twice on Sunday. I had been talking about the cast earlier. Like, despite a lot of the cast being up and comers and kind of not really discovered yet, also like some like kind of legendary names even at the time, Ossie Davis and Ruby Dee. Not mainstream famous necessarily, but like they were big deals, and they're here in this. And the performance for Sal is really good. Danny Aiello plays Sal. He brings a lot to that part, because Sal is a character that very easily could have been overplayed in either direction. He could have either been sympathetic to the point that it just skews your... in either direction. Either could have been too sympathetic or too hateable, and it would have skewed the perception of what happens at the end. And I think he rides that balance really well. There's a great sincerity from him when he talks about, I like it here, I want to be here, but at the same time, you get the little glimpses of what else is going on, behind the eyes and under the surface, and if we're being honest, nobody in this movie is the good guy. Nobody's the good person. Even characters who you would think would be, the too innocent for this world kind of thing. Like there is a clearly mentally disabled character named Smiley who's just going up and down the street. He has a difficult time talking, and he's just trying to sell pictures of Malcolm X or Martin Luther King Jr. or the two of them together for a couple of bucks. And that kind of character very often gets painted as like just the innocent angel who doesn't know what he's doing. Like, he's not, though. So and like he's not demonized either. That's the other thing. I'd say the closest to being demonized are maybe the cops. And given what happens when they show up, I'd say rightly so. But even the cops early on are not shown to be active aggressive, although they are pretty early on depicted as being not not well intentioned and not well minded. So like maybe the cops are the closest thing to like a straight, oh God, not these guys kind of characters. And I guess also arguably Vito, John Turturro's character. But for the most part, like it's just people. It's just people, flawed in some ways, and very strong in others. People doing foolish things, impulsive things, stupid things, smart things, wise things, brave things. And it all just slowly boils in the heat until it catches fire. It's like there's a plot. I could go A to B to C, but it's not a plot movie. It's a setting movie. It's a people movie. It's a neighborhood movie. And I feel like it captures that pretty well. I think it does a very good job accomplishing what it's going for. I know it had some criticism at the time for the women being pretty thinly written. Like Ruby Dee gets some moments to shine. It's hard to screw up if you've got her. And Rosie Perez definitely gives a very good performance, although I know there were some issues with how comfortable she actually was during some of the filming. From what I've heard from her, she and Spike Lee have like sort of come to terms with that, and they're on good terms. But like at the time, she wasn't super comfortable with some of what went on, so that's not great. But that's kind of for want of a criticism, and that doesn't make it an invalid criticism. But I think for where the movie's focus is and what it's doing, I think it does it extremely well in a way that is probably way more depressing now than it was even meant to be at the time. Do the Right Thing. You ever see this one? What'd you think about it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. What other Spike Lee movies have you seen? Do you like them? I mean, like, I'll be very mainstream brained and say that I probably like Inside Man. Most of the stuff of his I've seen, and that's not me saying it's his best movie, but that is me saying it's the movie he's made that I've seen that I actually have gone back and rewatched multiple times. So, I'm a sucker for a heist. What can I tell you? But whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon pays the bills and is in fact how I was commissioned to review this. But, even if you can't help me out that way, like, share, subscribe. They all help. Don't worry too much about it, though. We take a relaxed attitude around here, so you just come on back next time you need a break. And now to shout out my highest supporting patrons. Robin Moore, Jared Boyce, Zubin Lutfula, Auntie Kate 808, Mira G, Angry Casperol, Dave Hall, Oliver B, Sean Miller, Welsh Wrestling Geeks, Melissa Pedersen, Becky Sparks, Ulrich, Loki Eris, Tracy Scrabbit, Pal Barabajoggle, Sir Didymus is my favorite, and starting this month, I'm going to shout out 3 random supporters from the other tiers. So this month, my thanks to Tommy Castronova, Tim Price, and Caramelized Captain. If you want to hear me shout you out, check out the reward tiers on the Patreon. I put them one on each shoulder. They consolidated immediately. So, thanks, guys.